Well, howdy folks, I'd like to welcome you to What's in Tegan's Storage Locker, the show that dares to ask the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer today, as most days, is comic books. Specifically, all the comic books I bought when I was younger and that I probably didn't organize as well as I could because now they all need to be organized, put into bags and sometimes boards and all that good stuff. So that's what we're going to do here. On this channel. I put the first video up a little while ago, and it met with a positive response. Even though I didn't promote it, didn't even tell anyone about it, but it got a fair amount of views. So let's just put another one up and see where we go from there. So what we've done here is I've grabbed just a random couple inches out of one of the boxes that I have sitting here, and we're going to go through, see what we can find. First thing in the pile here is a copy of Oh Hello. And it's Roger. I've already been fighting with Roger for a good, I don't know, half hour before I started filming here, just to be able to start filming. You know, you don't need to be here, honey. Yep, you don't need to be here. You can just go sit over there. There's all sorts of things for you to do if you go over to that part of the room. I don't know why he wants to be on this part of the room, but he always wants to be on this part of the room when I'm doing something over here. Anyway, all right. Warlock and the Infinity Watch, number 11. This would have been from, oh, well, he found his little squeaky mouse. This would have been from the tail end of 1992, because this was issue 11. That would have been almost a full year after the end of the Infinity Gauntlet, because the first issue of this shipped right after the Infinity Gauntlet was over. This was one of Warlock's, actually maybe Warlock's most successful solo book. This lasted a good, 30-some issues. Then it basically fell apart because everything at Marvel was falling apart by the mid-90s. But this had a pretty good run. Him and all his buddies were caretaking the Infinity Gems, as it were. And this was a artistic fill-in issue. Jim Starlin, writer. Don't recognize Steve Carr and Daryl Skelton. I'm sure I saw more of their stuff at the time, but not ringing that much of a bell. Here's an advanced ad for Aladdin. Can you imagine a time before we all knew those songs by heart? I never even saw that movie, like once on VHS, and I still don't know those songs by heart. This was this conversation issue with Eternity and the Living Tribunal, which were my absolute favorites. The cover says The Secrets of the Watch, so basically just an origin recap issue, which were great if you didn't grow up in the 1970s. Hero Quest, here's a Milton Bradley attempt at a Dungeons and Dragons type game. This is pretty nice. Not the main talent on this book at the time would have been Tom Rainey. I wanted to say Angel Medina, but I can't remember if I'm getting them mixed up, because I used to get them mixed up all the time. No, Candyman. I was disappointed with Candyman because I just wanted another Hellraiser. I think I'd like it better if I went back and watched it again. The Spider-Man and the X-Men game, that was for the Super Nintendo. That was not a fun game. I never got past like the first levels. They had different levels by character. I never got past any of the first levels, and I spent a lot of time on it. It's very difficult. It was back when they didn't care that they were putting out a game that was too difficult for the kids to play. That's just what they did. So they're recapping Warlock's history and Moondragon's origin. More Super Nintendo games. Yeah, this is a nice looking book. Drax. When he was in his mentally damaged phase, because when Kronos brought him back at the very beginning of the Infinity Gauntlet stories, when he brought him back, he'd been dead for years, so he was brain damaged. And he stayed that way for a while until they got to this was for about a decade, and then they rehabbed him so that he was a tough guy covered in tattoos, and that's the version that you're more familiar with. Bullpen bulletins with one of the Rick Parker cartoons that were so cute. He did the Beavis and Butthead book that came out a little bit later than this, which I only managed to find a few issues of because I wasn't getting to the comic book store regularly. But it was pretty good. If you were a fan of Beavis and Butthead, it was very much in line with that whole franchise. Oh man, you can just see they're cruising for a bruising here because this is dated 1992, and I bought a lot of this, and this is way too many books for Marvel to be publishing. And more basketball cards. X-Men Pressman game. I remember seeing ads for this, but I sure never played it. There's only so much. Even back then, when I was at the height of my Marvel mania, there was still, only so much money you can spend on Marvel books in any given, Marvel merchandise in any given month. There we go. All right, what's next in the pile here? Who's Who in Star Trek. Now this is a little bit more beat up because I bought this one when I was a little kid because Star Trek, I just bought it sometimes because I watched Star Trek on TV, even though 80s Star Trek was, well, let's just say most Star Trek comic books are kind of sleepy. They don't necessarily value the same things a lot of other media adaptations do. It's not necessarily about making an exciting adaptation so much as making sure you get all those likenesses right. And Star Trek's kind of a stagey thing to begin with, so, maybe the books were a little bit less pulse-pounding than they could have, like the Star Wars books. Bill Sienkiewicz cover, though. It's not that he didn't do any work for DC in the 80s, because he did. It just didn't do as much. It was sort of a special thing to see Sienkiewicz on a DC book, although, of course, when I first bought this, I didn't know who Sienkiewicz was. But, of course, like all of these oh, hello. I see, you came to check out what's going on. No, honey. You see what I have to put up with here. Now, of course, if Martin Scorsese has to deal with a cat, he can probably just, pay someone to get the cat out of his way. The fun thing about these Who's Who books is that they could get all sorts of fun people to do the art for them. If it was just, oh, wait, no, that wasn't Sienkiewicz. That was Howard Chaykin. Huh, it looks a little bit like Sienkiewicz, actually. But it's how it says right here, big as anything, Howard Chaykin. Mike Clark and Carl Kiesel, Art T-Bear. He was doing a lot of work for DC at the time. George Perez. Fun, he's doing, one of the Greek gods. John Byrne. John Byrne actually did a few pieces in here. Ken Penders, name you might be more familiar with if you're a fan of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Get off of your brother. Anyway, what was I saying? Yes, Ken Penders, John Byrne. And the thing with this Who's Who specifically is it's not just characters from the comic book. It's characters from the show and the movie as well, because all that stuff was, much of it was folded into the comic book. Jan Girasima, Jonathan Peterson, Greg Theakston on ink, another Ken Penders, Art T-Bear, Mike DiCarlo, Ken Penders, Dan Spiegel. Nice, very, very bare bones. Pavel Chekhov there. Dennis Cowan. That's a scary picture of Matthew Decker. Of course, he's kind of a scary fella. Ron Frenz. He did a few pieces for DC at this time as well. He did a Superman annual with Post-Crisis Titano. Another Dennis Cowan, another Ron Frenz with Dick Giordano. Kevin Maguire. Michael Baer. Joe Brzezowski. Don't know that name, but he's doing the Enterprise. Another Joe Brzezowski. He must have been there. Elliot R. Brown. Jim Reddington and Greg Theakston. Steve Bove. Jonathan Peterson. Mike Clark. Dennis Cowan. Drawing the Gorns. I think I heard the Gorns are a big deal in the new Star Trek show. That should be cool. They never really did anything with them. Dennis Cowan. Mike Clark and Tony Salmon's on inking. That's a name you wouldn't have expected to see, but there you go. He didn't really do any DC work in this period. Dennis Cowan again. Ron Randall. John Byrne drawing the Horta. Dan Jurgens, Pablo Marcus, another John Byrne. Ken Penders, Ron Frenz. That's nice little, like, you know, 2-panel retelling of City on the Edge of Forever. John Byrne, wow, pretty nice looking con. James Kirk, who did Kirk? That was Tom Sutton. I think he was one of the main guys who was drawing the book. Nice looking profile. Klingons, another 3-pager by Dan Jurgens. And a little artifact of the time. You can see both the original series Klingons, who don't really have the forehead thing, and then the Klingons as they started to look in the movies, and Next Generation, which I didn't think existed at this time, when they started to have the forehead bumps, such as, there you go, Tom Sutton, Jim Reddington, another Ken Penders, a lot of Ken Penders, Kevin Maguire. Oh, that's a nice looking piece, of course. Would expect no different from Kevin Maguire. Dennis Cowan, Bill Ray. See, you see the strangest names just popping up. Dr. McCoy. Oh, Gray Morrow, there you go. Nice looking piece of work. And of course, because I was a kid, you know, I got this when I was a young kid, so it's sort of amazing that it's still in one piece. You'll get a bag. And another DC. Adventures of Superboy 13. Looking back on it, I have no idea why I bought this. I think I went through a brief phase where I was sort of trying to get into Superman around 1990, but I bought like one storyline. I just sort of lost track of it. It was the Crisis of the Crimson Kryptonite one. This was not related to that. This was a tie-in to a TV show that I don't even think I ever saw. There's some hockey cards. Who did this? This was Tom Payer writing. He's still around. Paris Collins penciling with Ty Templeton on inks. That is a very, very nice matchup. And this is indeed a nice looking book. Greatest Flash Stories Ever Told. It's an excellent book. If you ever see one of these, if you ever see any of their old Greatest Stories Ever Told series in the used bookstore, they try to do them every now and again now, but the original printings are the best. You can learn a lot from those books because they have thick historical endnotes. Gargoyle's Quest for Game Boy. I don't think I ever played that. Yeah, this is kind of fun. I mean, I can see why I wouldn't have really dug this because it's, you know, I was just really getting into Marvel at this time, and this is pretty much, you know, not a Marvel book. You know, this ad for Detective Comics there would have been 637. I actually just got this back issue, I think, earlier in the year, so I finally caught up with it. Yeah, this is kind of cool. Maybe if I see more issues of Superboy, I'll pick these up, because this is a nice looking book. Fun stuff. And these Neil Adams drawn Three Musketeer ads that were everywhere for a while. WrestleMania challenge. I was not into wrestling. I think the thing, you know, you get into the things that your parents can tolerate. My parents had no problems with me reading comic books, but they would have drawn the line at me watching wrestling, I think. They didn't have any patience for that. Supergirl 15. This would have been from the Peter David run of Supergirl from the late 90s. And I have to confess, I love this book. The reason I love this book was because it got started with art by Gary Frank. And especially the first decade of his work, I loved. When he had Cam Smith inking him, and he had a very, you can see here, sort of a clean line-ish, very Alan Davis influence. Then later on, his inkers went for a more fine line, and I just don't dig it anywhere near as much. But of course, he didn't, I'm trying to remember if he even did the first year of the book. He was succeeded by Leonard Kirk, who I did end up liking as well. Who did Leonard Kirk have inking him? He still had Cam Smith inking him. This was, of course, not the Linda Danvers, Kara Zor-El Supergirl. Oh, that's charming ad. 90s advertisements there. But the Matrix Supergirl, who was... all right, if I got going on that, we'd be here all day. But basically, they had to jump through a lot of hoops to get around the fact that John Byrne didn't want there to be any other surviving Kryptonians but Superman. So the Supergirl that they had was a version from an alternate universe that also had a Superboy in it. And I think that's where the Kryptonian super criminals were, and the Legion of Superheroes were involved with that, honestly, without reading those books, trying to tell you exactly how that worked. But long story short, the Matrix Supergirl, who was an artificial creation of that universe's Lex Luthor, came over to this universe, sort of ended up under the sway of our Lex Luthor for a while, who was Australian at the time. Just don't ask. Oh, there we go. Power Girl. Awesome. Yep. You get a bag. Although she was fighting the, I want to say that's the extremists. And God, I want to talk about a team of villains I have never cared for. Oh, and another issue of Supergirl. This would be another month from the, there was I'm sure they had a name for it, but it was just the name where they had the nice portraiture for all the covers. And again, another cover by Gary Frank and Cam Smith. And Gary Frank on the cover and Cam Smith interiors. That's not that bad of a matchup right there. Another weird mellow yellow ad. These must have been from the same month as some of the books from the earlier box, earlier pile. These things here, I remember, did anyone ever buy one of these? It was these weird little dioramas with these pewter figures and famous covers. And I bought some silly things in my time, but I stopped short of the pewter figurines. Let's see. The Watch This Space, which is their version of the bullpen bulletins. They're advertising one of the early Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale team-ups, because I guess this is the Halloween issue. Ian McNulty. Get down to Baltimore. looks disgusting. They probably still sell them. If it looks like something you would never eat on a bet, that means that it's been one of the most popular snack foods in the world for 20 years. Combos. I can't stand combos. They somehow persist. Oh, here we go. Alf 49. Not just any issue of Alf. The penultimate issue. Now, if you have ever followed me on any social media, you know I'm a bit of a fan of Alf, a non-ironic fan of Alf. He was my favorite thing when I was a kid. But the thing about Alf is the comic book was so much better than the show. As far as I'm concerned, the show, which was a real, it was kind of a bad trip for everyone involved. It was just a low point in a lot of people's careers. It was supposedly an ordeal to film every single second of it. But the comic book was something completely different. It had a different sort of sense of humor. It had Marie Severin inking every issue with work by Dave Manek. He'd been an editor for years. George Roussos, he was colorist all the way back to the beginning of Marvel. Just a nice book that was beloved. It managed to stay on the shelves for 50 issues. Almost outlasted the show, but once the show was canceled, they just didn't really have much reason to keep it on the shelves. And here they're sort of, let's see. Oh yes, this was a multi-issue sequence because they were Bart versus the Space Mutants. That was the first Simpsons. I want to say that was the first Simpsons video game. I rented that one a few times. Oh God, these things, the handheld. You'd get one for a long car trip, and it would end up breaking after you played it for an hour. Every time, invariably. And see, this is fun. This is just Alf's girlfriend on a planet full of shapes, I guess. See, a totally different vibe than the series. Sports cards, Dungeons and Dragons games. They would just do, fun. Alf's Armory pinup page. They didn't get if they really wanted to have to be authentic, they would have got Elliot R. Brown to do the Alf's Armory. Another bullpen bulletin. That's disturbing. Forgot about the dog. And next issue, last issue. You must not miss Alf 50, a giant size special. Indeed. See, there were this book had its following. It has had fans. Enough so that they could, make a big deal out of the last issue. It didn't just sort of slip under the doorway. This is a quarter box, not a corner box. That's the idea, the type of humor you had to deal with there. Come on. Captain Planet. Never watched Captain Planet. It was never on, it was just one of those shows that wasn't on. Where you were living depended on what you got to watch on the TV. Another issue of Warlock. Oh, this is from the Infinity Crusade. Warlock Chronicles. This was 94? No, 93. This would have been 93. Because that would have been, Gauntlet was 91. War was 92. Image founding year. Crusade was 93. And of course, because I was a sucker, I over-invested in the Infinity Crusade because I kept wanting to chase that feeling. And again, wow, another one where Dungeons & Dragons TSR. Oh, and here's a fold-out ad. They did these every now and again. Celebrating all the X-Men and Avengers 30th anniversary stuff. But yeah, back when Dungeons & Dragons was TSR, they spent a lot of money on Marvel ads. So anyway, this would have been an 8-issue limited series. It basically just ran for the duration of Crusade to basically just provide another Warlock book during the big storyline. And this was, as I was saying, the main team of Tom Rainey and Keith Williams with Jim Starlin, of course. Another Dungeons and Dragons. Man, they paid a lot of money to Marvel this month. They were trying to push something other than the straight Dungeons and Dragons formula. So this was a VCR game. I never ever came anywhere near playing any of that. Oh, there's just Mephisto hanging out, sitting on a console. Bullpen Bulletins, another Rick Parker. These Rick Parker cartoons, they always at the expense of the boss, Tom DeFalco, Marvel tradition. You don't get away with making fun of the boss quite so easily at DC, although, you know, if you're ambush bug, you do. Well, there you go. That's a nice little spread there. Eternity and infinity in their natural habitat. Yeah, it's a crossover tie-in, but this is a nice looking book nonetheless. Fun stuff. I know, take a drink every time I say fun stuff. You get a bag. Oh, and another issue of Warlock. This would have been from the Infinity War, because Thanos is fighting his evil twin. And the thing with Thanos' evil twin is he was more or less just another Thanos, because Thanos is his own evil twin and his own good twin. It's that, you know, read the book and you'll understand. Everything, you know, at the time, I guess it really jumps out now that they were really starting to get to, like, what's the word I'm looking for? They were just starting to fill the landscape with Marvel merchandising. You can tell that the brand was really on an upswing, and they would be on an upswing for a good another couple of years, and then very much not on an upswing. Although the funny thing is the Marvel brand actually was not really hurt by the bankruptcy. That was the funny part of it. It was just the company itself. People still liked Spider-Man. That was never in doubt. Yeah, the Doctor Giggles. The whole point of the Infinity War was the Magus came back and he put together the gauntlet again, sort of, not to give it away. This is Tom Rainey again. No, this is Angel Medina. Yeah, there you go. Angel Medina and Bob Allman. See, I did get them mixed up sometime. Oh, hello. Oh, no. Oh, and these things, every issue used to have at least one, sometimes 2 pages of entertainment this month. I think I even got these ads in the mail. I don't know if I ever ordered anything, but they were fun to pore over and see what was hot. See, just Thanos fighting Thanos for... And then of course, you know, who wins when Thanos fights Thanos? Barry Sanders. Believes that a Super Bowl ring is worth dying for. Did he ever get a Super Bowl ring? I don't know. Someone in the comments will tell me. He just kills himself and eats the butterfly of further enlightenment. That's a memorable sequence right there, must admit. Jim Starlin had a few ideas. I remember being generally disappointed with the war, and then the Crusade just was too much. Ironically, I think he said that he enjoyed Crusade more than War, but the evil twin hook was pretty good. And then, of course, when they did Infinity War for the movies, nary an evil twin in sight, which, you know, I wasn't... It ain't Infinity War if it doesn't have an evil twin, but what do I know? Oh, another issue is Supergirl. with another one of these wonderful Gary Frank covers. At this point, I could have been buying it just for the Gary Frank covers, but I was enjoying it because I bought pretty much everything Peter David did during this period that wasn't Soul Searchers and Company. I don't know if did anyone buy Soul Searchers and Company? I'm not trying to mock it. I've never seen an issue in all my years. I just see it joked about in other Peter David comic books. No, honey. Oh, boy. You see what I have to put up with? What was this an ad for? Another Sonic game. Sonic R for Sega Saturn. Fighting Despero. Oh, he kills a bear. I don't want to see him kill a bear. There's that dang ice cream truck ad again. Oh, and there she's got the angel wings, which were, I don't even know if I'm going to say they were controversial, because how many people were paying attention to Supergirl at this point? They were different. And then, at some point you'd expect them to bring back the flaming angel wing era for, oh, come on, guy, don't tear that apart. Oh. Oh, you see what I have to put up with here? No, no, no. No, you don't get to tear that apart. And here is suddenly an issue of you wanted to see the X-Men. Oh, you get to just sit there and be... Are you going to sit there and be quiet? I'll let you sit there if you just be quiet. I think I ended up with 2 copies of Uncanny X-Men 255 for various reasons. When your mom picks you up a copy and she picks you up one you already got. I can't do anything. Ow. All right. Uncanny X-Men 255. Not Mark Silvestri's last issue, but towards the end of his run on the book. This was right before the... You're just going to sit there whatever I do, aren't you? See, this is the issue where Destiny dies. Are you upset about that still? They brought her back. They brought her back, and she's young now. She's not old. She's hot, so, comic book, nature reasserted itself. Ow, ow. Ow, ow. Now that's what they should have done. They should have had Aunt May die and then get reborn on Krakoa like, 22 years old. That would have really got the message boards going. Do people still talk about message boards? Probably. Well, I was going to say Twitter, but people don't really do Twitter anymore either. I don't know where people go to complain about X-Men books. That's another TSR ad. Like I was saying, this was towards the end of Mark Silvestri's run, because this is the issue before the Jim Lee 3-parter with Lady Mandarin, Jordan versus Bird 1-on-1. See, when I was growing up, that was how it was. There was just 2 great basketball players in this world. Michael Jordan, Larry Bird. Then Bird retired, and then it was just Jordan. Mark Silvestri and Dan Green, R.I.P. I was just reading this the other day for in another context. And the team here is it's just a regular team of X-Men, basically put together from whoever was hanging around Muir Isle when the Reavers got to town and decided they were going to kill everyone there, because that's just what they did. And then they decided, to send in Freedom Force to beat the Reavers. So you had two villain teams fighting each other. So that was kind of fun, because this was an era where you didn't really have a regular team of X-Men. You had like Cairo, Illinois. This is where Storm came through the Siege Perilous, and she was a small child. So the whole team was scattered to the four winds, and you had Forge, one of the very few people who were still going around calling themselves an X-Man. Like I say, they got to get Freedom Force to fight their enemies, basically, because Forge comes in and says, like, yeah, this is a great way to get one over on the X-Men, if I'm remembering correctly. And here we're building up to next issue with the holy moly. And the thing I love about Claremont is even when he was writing the best-selling book in the country, he was still putting in notes to Slain by the Daughters of the Dragon and Deadly Hands of Kung Fu 32 and 33, which is not a book even in 1989 that anyone would ever have read. But I always loved his willingness to just always be plucking stuff out of continuity, especially if it's from a book he read, but still, made the Marvel Universe seem rather lived in. And the thing with the Reavers, they had Lady Deathstrike. They were actually really formidable. They were just a bunch of cyborgs with guns, but they just about killed the whole X-Men. They just went through them like paper. They went after the Punisher once, and I think Punisher had to blow up a building to get him off his tail. But then after this period, they didn't really do a lot. They didn't really have anywhere to go. Like, what do you do after you kill the X-Men? Well, the X-Men kind of got better, and then I think they just sort of did they have the Sentinels kill them at the beginning of the Will Sportasio era, I want to say? Oh, there we go. She is very unhappy there. And she wouldn't get justice for that for decades. When finally Destiny was brought back. Man, Mark Silvestri was just so good. So still is, but in his prime, he couldn't be beat. All right. Oh, more of these Tiger handheld. Tiger handheld, Jordan versus Bird. So you can experience the two best basketball players in the world as weird pixels. Here we go. You, my friend, you're Mark Silvestri X-Men, so you get aboard. And, what do we got here? Wildcats source book #1. Now, I did not read Wildcats, so I think I probably would have just ended up, maybe I bought this on a trip because it was at a 7-Eleven or something, and I needed something to read. Covered by, I want to say, that looks a lot like Michael Golden to me. Is that Michael Golden? What do you say? Is that Michael Golden? Where does it say? You're not going to tell me? Where is the cover credit? Yeah, it says it's listed on every page, but where is the cover listed? Okay, well, I'm just going to log in online and show you on the screen right now. Is it a Michael Golden cover? There's your answer. Here's Jay Lee, Trevor Scott. I barely know who any of these people are. I was just saying to a friend the other day, they were saying to me actually, it's impossible to read Wildcats. And I concurred. They've still got the cryptographers in Oxford working on the question. Brett Booth with Alex Garner on inks. And boy, look at this text. Can you make any of that out? Red text on Brett Booth, Alan M? Alan M, is that your whole name? Alan M? Might very well be, I don't know. Lord Imp. Pencils by Jeffrey Scott. What's this character's name? Gnome? That character's named Gnome. Art by Sal Regla. Brett Booth drawing Grifter. I know who that guy is. I even had a Grifter toy because I never read Wildcats, but I bought the toys because they were really nice. They had a one-up on Todd McFarlane toys at the time because they had Playmates do a Wildcats line for the cartoon, and you could actually play with them as opposed to the Todd toys, which were never really made to be played with. Jeffrey Scott again. Oh, it was a Jim Lee. John Lynch. He was in Gen 13, I want to say, because I did read that one. Another Jay Lee. Scott Clark and Trevor Scott. Scott Clark and Trevor Scott. No relation. Spartan by Sean McManus. The Merv. Drawing by Rick Wilkins. Another Brett Booth number. Oh, and here is Gary, Frank, and Cam Smith. You know, that might have got me through the door all on its own, Gary, Frank, and Cam Smith, although I hope I didn't need to know anything about Void. Oh, and here's Voodoo by Jeffrey Scott. Warblade, Alex Garner. Team shot of the Wildcats. Pencil by Jeffrey Scott again. And another Jeffrey Scott, Zealot. And she's going to be in the new Birds of Prey book that I'm actually looking forward to because that's a book I do read. Come on, get in there. There you go. Wildcat source book number 1. And what's next here? Oh, goodness. How about Avengers 346. Looks like it got a little mangled. You know, that's what happens when you buy comics when you're a kid and you loan them out to all your friends. From the Operation Galactic Storm crossover, which I dearly loved. I loved that crossover. It was 19 parts, 19 golden parts. Beetlejuice game. It was a crossover where it actually felt like something happened in every issue. Maybe if I went back and read it again, I might not feel that way. From the Bob Harris period, which I admit I liked at the time, but I do not necessarily think I would like it so much now because it was kind of all about the character assassination of some female characters, which it took them decades before they'd use Circe again. And you know, Crystal, you could argue that Crystal is probably, any character assassination for her is probably a step up from her actual characterization. And all the Crystal fans can just scream at me in the comments. All 3 of you. And the Avengers are fighting in outer space. They're fighting the Kree Star Force. Tom Palmer on the inks here with Steve Epting, who would later go on to do quite a bit of fun stuff. He did a lot of Captain America after the X-Men trading cards. Another Dungeons and Dragons. And here we go. Up to no good, Supreme Intelligence. What does it say about the Kree that their Supreme Intelligence, supposedly the composite of all the greatest minds of their people is just an absolute stinker. Just an absolute, resolute stinker. Well, let's look at a couple more here. I grabbed a big pile, so let's just look and see what we got. Oh, yet another issue of Warlock. I think this is the 12. I had 11 earlier. Tom Rainey work. Turbo Touch. This would have been, I think, longer play, higher levels, quicker response, faster motion, no more sore thumbs, better control, high scores. I never bought anything like that. I was too boring. And here we go with, I think this was a sad story about, basically about dealing with Drax's brain damage and whether or not he actually remembers who he is, because who he used to be is her father. And she's wondering whether or not he still remembers who he was. Marvel's X-Men are hotter than ever. Here's the first in their action-packed video adventures from back in the day when a new episode of the show, of your favorite show, would come out and you'd rush out to get it on VHS. Nice screen tone on this one page of the book. Should have done screen tone for the whole book, buddy. And he goes to Reno, and who's living in Reno at this point in time? Yep, that's right. The ever-incredible Hulk. Oh, and he's going after another Rick Parker on the bullpen bulletins. He's going after that saxophone, because he used to be a saxophone player. And we see a giant green hand reaching in. This is my town, Drax. Hit the road, Battletoad. Wayne's World VCR board game. See, they were getting a lot of mileage out of things you could do with your VCR, other than, like, stuffing it full of peanut butter. Uncanny X-Men 318. Cover by Joe Madureira. Roger Cruz guest penciler. This would have been from 1994, because here's an ad for the Greg and Tim Hildebrandt series of Marvel Masterpiece cards. They had them do a whole series of trading cards. I had them. I had the whole set. I just got the whole set in a box, and they were very nice looking cards. And I think they even did a collected edition of them not that long ago, and a few years ago at least. I say not that long ago. It was probably 5 or 6 years. A prelude to Generation X. They just had a crossover. That was a prelude to Generation X. Oh, here's the X-Men walking around doing X-Men things. There's Jubilee hanging out with the other members of Generation X, not Gen 13. Generation X. Monet, Page, Everett Thomas, Sink, who was recently brought back for the X-Men after being ignominiously killed for I think he was dead for many decades there. An ad for Cliff Notes. Cliff Notes, this seems to me like something you didn't really need to have an ad up for Cliff Notes. People knew what they were, but what do I know? Do they even still sell them anymore? With the internet being such as it is. Oh, Marvel wants your input. Oh, I think I sent this in. I think I sent this in, and better part of a year later, they sent back some kind of, they sent me back a copy of Gambit #1, which I already had. But that was their thank you for filling out the survey. Here's interesting. What are these survey questions? Let's go through them. The X-Men are currently published monthly. Would you prefer the X-Men as a bi-weekly title, every 2 weeks, or should it stay monthly? Yes or no, should Wolverine get his adamantium skeleton and claws back? Do you think Spider-Man should get married or get a divorce from Mary Jane? That's the one Spider-Man question on here. Man, they wanted to get that marriage annulled from the very beginning. They'd only been married for, well, this was 7 or 8 years into it. And they already did not like it, you could tell. Marvel's only publishing 1 Wolverine title per month. Would you buy 2 Wolverine titles per month? Do you like Sabretooth better as a hero or a villain? Who are the 3 X-Men characters you would most like to see get their own monthly title? Would you like to see a marriage between Rogue and Gambit? No, 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 no. Where's the write-in to be like, can you just put it on file for the 2020s? Divorce, divorce, divorce. Do not like them together. Need them divorced. Just don't like the marriage. Don't like it. Which Marvel character would you most like to see get their own 2099 title? This was, I think, before the X-Men had their own book, or right around there. So, who's your favorite Marvel superhero? Who's your favorite Marvel villain? If I filled this out at the time, or when I filled this out at the time, I'm pretty sure I would have said Silver Surfer, but now, of course, I'd put Rogue, which is hence the, divorce Gambit as fast as you possibly can. Make sure he gets nothing in the settlement. Nothing. He deserves nothing. He's a thief. He can support himself. Not that any of the X-Men have any property or assets at all. That's kind of the scam with the X-Men, is you join and, Charles ends up, getting all your stuff sooner or later. All right. Oh, a custom comic you could order. And I never did that because it looked goofy as heck, but, it had Rogue in it, so I probably should have. Featuring the talents of Bob Budiansky, Jim Craig, and Dan McDonnell, otherwise known as the people who worked in the Special Projects office at Marvel at the time. You can order male or female version with a trading card. Captain Universe. The hero who could be you. X-Facts, so this would have been a bullpen bulletins page for the X-Men line. This was since this is right leading up to Generation X, this would have been like only 4 or 5 months away from the age of apocalypse, meaning things were about to get intense. Weird Science, the television show. And Mantis. Not Marvel's Mantis, not DC's Mantis, Fox's Mantis. I don't remember anything about Mantis. I don't think I ever watched it. The ads didn't really do much to get me to want to watch it. And I'm thinking, maybe one more. What do we got here? We got something. Oh, here's something fun. War Machine number 8. If this is the only way I can get the plans for my tin suit, so be it. Now, the deal with a War Machine book at the time was that this was the first attempt at a War Machine solo series, and the hook was he had a big falling out with Iron Man. So Jim Rhodes struck out on his own. But because he struck out on his own, Iron Man wasn't going to do any repairs for his suit. So the big deal for the series was that his suit started to get more and more bedraggled. And he kept needing to repair it himself, and he wasn't Tony Stark, so that started to be a problem. Scott Benson and Len Kaminsky writing with Gabriel Gecko, Pam Eklund on inks. So flashback to James Rhodes' history as Iron Man. And this was kind of fun because the suit was starting to get really long in the tooth. Now the fun part of this series what they were trying to do here was something that they've tried to do periodically, but only very rarely with any success. Trying to make War Machine a proactive superhero who is going to go around the world to various war zones and get involved in real-world problems, or at least, comic book versions of them, because he wanted to make a difference in the world as opposed to the Avengers. Was that? I don't know who any of these characters are. I was going to say that looks like Val Cooper, but that's not Val Cooper. Bethany Cabe. Great Iron Man supporting character who never really... See, she's a redhead in a Marvel comic, so you think they would have done something with her at some point. But they never ended up doing anything with Bethany Cabe. So, Al Ewing, she's right there, man. So, yeah, they get to fight, and, oh, the Mandarin, when he had his green lizard hands. Right before the Hands of the Mandarin crossover. And I think that was probably a sign that they had gone too far with the Iron Man brand, because there were way too many Iron Man books. Like 2 Iron Man books was probably too many. Oh yeah, and here's the hype box for issue 1 of Generation X. What else were they pushing it this month? Right in the middle of the Clone Saga. NFL Pro Action. I don't even remember what that is. It's not NFL Super Pro. It's NFL Pro Action. With Gambit and Rogue. Now I want to read it because it's got Rogue in it, but I have no idea what it is. My goodness. Punisher Warzone 33. With, I think this was during the Joe Kubert run of Punisher Warzone. Night Thrasher during the Busiek run of Night Thrasher. Oh, I think it's Busiek. I just say, I think I just saw the other day him telling someone how to pronounce it, so I go and mispronounce it again. Yep, be on board for the Hands of the Mandarin crossover. Which was ForceWorks, War Machine, and Iron Man. And another ad for Weird Science. See, the subscription ad has shrunk a bit, but that's still, that's probably maybe around a solid size of a line, but they're already shrinking, I think, because it's 1994 and fewer people are buying comics. All right. Is that enough? That's the better part of an hour that we've whiled away here talking about various comic books. All right. So, I guess that'll be it for this time. Check in with you later, Home Slice.